We've all been sick in our lives. The last few years, we've learned a lot about being sick. We've also heard the terms immunity, immune system, and for those who don't really know much about how that works, I wanted to start a series on the immune system. And today we're going to talk about the innate immune system. This will be part 1 of 2. So the first question is, what is the immune system? So simply put, the immune system is a very complicated series of processes, cell action, and responses that your body goes through when you're physically injured, when you're sick, and when you have allergies and a bunch of other things. And with the immune system, you essentially have families of cells geared towards assisting or helping in a body response, like I said, when it comes to being injured, being sick, and things like that. So my second question is, how do cells recognize other cells and figure out if the body should attack a cell or be friendly? So that happens because of these special receptors that our cells recognize called PAMPs. So PAMPs is it's an acronym. It stands for pathogen associated molecular patterns. So let's say you have a virus that gets in your body, and one of your immune cells finds it. In this case, what's called a macrophage. I'm gonna respell that, macrophage, because my handwriting is terrible. Macrophage. So the macrophage connects to this cell, this pathogen, and this pathogen has a structure on it, right? This little piece right here, and that structure is consistent with other pathogens, right? Other pathogens have similar structures, and our cells recognize those structures, and it identifies this as a foreigner, because the immune cells don't have brains, but they have to use these different processes to figure out what's what. And in this case, our immune cell comes in contact with the pathogen, and it turns on the immune response. And this is going to be an innate immune response. It's not going to have any memory of the pathogen. It's not going to be extremely specific, but it does deal with general threats. So when that threat is identified, you can think of it like a stoplight. The immune system is green for go. It's ready to go into action. Now, my next question is, how do immune system cells communicate with each other? Right? When this macrophage comes into contact with this pathogen, how is it that when this happens, other immune cells can come in and help out and deal with the situation? Because they can't talk like we can talk. They can't communicate like we can communicate. But they do have messengers that get sent out to do certain things. So these messengers are a big group. I'm only talking about a few, but they're very important, as you'll see. So the first one I want to talk about is histamine. Histamine is something we're all familiar with because a lot of us take antihistamines, and antihistamines help us deal with the allergies like sneezing, runny nose, itchy throat, because that is a response of the immune system, and that's because of histamine. So histamine causes that sneezing, that itchiness, that sore throat, other things like that. Histamine also does a couple other things that are really important. Histamine also dilates blood vessels, because your vessels need to move blood through your body because that's where all the immune cells travel. So it's like expanding a road from 2 lanes to 4 lanes. Histamine takes your blood vessels and it opens them up so more blood can flow. It also recruits white blood cells to help with what's going on. And white blood cells are really important. We'll talk more about that in part 2. But histamine is a really important chemical that our body uses to really get the action going and start communicating with the body. Then we have cytokines. So cytokines is a catch-all term for proteins, and these proteins do a bunch of different things. They attract immune cells. They interfere with viruses. Oh, this is terrible. It doesn't matter. And they do a bunch of other stuff. They regulate the immune system. A lot of this is what I'm going to describe these things down here. Chemokines are a cytokine that attracts immune cells. That's why I put this little heart here. Okay. Chemokines get sent out and they attract other white blood cells to come to a specific location and help out. Then we have interferons, and interferons interfere with viral replication. So viral replication is interesting because viruses, I'm going to do this quickly, they will attach to a cell, they'll inject their genetic material into the cell, right? This is the cell's nucleus. And then through a series of processes, that nucleus will start to create more viruses. And then eventually, the viruses burst out of the cell and go on to affect other cells. And when you stop this replication, the virus can't hurt the host. So interferons are really important because they stop viruses from replicating. Now, interleukins do a bunch of different things. I don't want to go too deep into them because this video is already going to be a little long. Interleukins help mature cells. So in the adaptive immune system, when you have a threat, a bunch of different cells are communicated with. And some of those cells are juvenile, right? They haven't really grown up yet. But once the threat is seen, they start to mature into the cells that they need to be. So that's what I mean by it matures cells. And it also regulates the immune system, because you want a proper immune response, but what you don't want is the immune system to fight against itself. You also don't want the immune system to go unregulated, because some of these cells that attack these pathogens can also destroy our own body tissues. These are the messengers, some of them, not all of them, and they really, as you can see, help facilitate that process so that the cells that we need to help can get to the location and help. This is a little diagram of having a physical injury and how the immune system helps out with that. This video is mostly going to be about pathogens, but I wanted to give a quick overview. So let's say you get a splinter, an injury, and then you pull it out. Immediately what you'll notice, and you'll notice the same thing with other types of physical pain. You'll notice a physical injury. You'll notice pain, redness, swelling, itching, the blood clots. That's all a part of the innate immune response. That means everything's working well. When you have something like this, you'll have white blood cells that spring into action to destroy any bacteria or anything nasty that can get through that wound. You'll have this incredibly complex cascade of what's called clotting factors, and I'm not going to talk about. And these clotting factors is it's a long process that clots the blood and does a bunch of other stuff. So those kind of spring into action as well. The blood vessels dilate so that the white blood cells and things can get through, and all this stuff goes down, and over time your injury heals, and you can thank those white blood cells for that healing. So the innate immune system is really what responds during physical injury. Again, the innate immune system is a general response. It's not really specific to anything. One day you wake up and you're feeling a little clammy. Your throat's itchy, it's sore, you got a headache, you're cold, but you're also hot, and you realize you probably have a fever and you're sick. The night before, you're hanging out with some friends, and one of your friends was a little sick. You didn't think anything of it, but you wake up now and you're feeling pretty rough. I wanted to give a little diagram as to what's happening. This is very general. Let's say you're at your friend's house and they're sick, they sneeze, and you breathe in some of this pathogen that they have. This pathogen goes on to get into some of this nasal tissue, and from there, it connects with a cell, in this case a macrophage, just like the last description. And it goes into the cell, and ideally the pathogen is decomposed by a lysosome. Think about Lysol, right? You spray Lysol, it captures the odor molecules so that you can't smell them anymore. Lysosomes do a similar thing. It captures the pathogen, breaks it up, and then it's thrown out as debris. Another thing that happens is the pathogen is processed, by the cell, and these cytokines are produced, right? Those chemokines, those interleukins, other things like that. And those go on to recruit other cells. This is a very general idea of how this all works. Sometimes the macrophages don't make it and they get destroyed, but this is an ideal situation. So in summary, we have this immune system that protects us from all these different things. Specifically, the innate immune system has this very general response to things. It will attack pathogens. It will help us heal our physical injuries. And our cells recognize those threats by way of those molecular patterns, those PAMPs. And then these messengers are sent out to communicate with the body to recruit other cells, to deal with viral replication, to regulate the immune system. Then we have physical injury. When we get physically injured, the innate immune system springs into action to help heal us and get the situation under control. And then I just gave a real world example of how some of this works when you do get sick. Again, it's very, very, very basic. So the next video, we're going to get into part 2, the last part of the innate immune system. Going to talk about cytokines and COVID. Some of us may have heard, unfortunately, when a lot of people pass away from COVID, they get this thing called the cytokine storm. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit. We're going to talk about the complement system, this relatively complicated system that does a lot more immune regulation. And I won't get into the gritty details, but we're going to talk about it a little bit because it's important, especially if you're learning about the immune system right now. Then we're going to talk about the white blood cells. What are the players in this whole immune system game? Who does what? Because there's a bunch of different white blood cells and how they all have to do with innate immunity. Then we'll get into some other things in the next parts. Thank you so much for listening and watching, especially if you made it through the whole video. I'm really looking forward to the rest of this series and some other things I'm going to post soon. I appreciate everyone once again, and I will see you guys with another video.